Hey, I'm James. I'm 47 years old. I was convicted under felony drug possession laws and sentenced to 5 years in prison for using marijuana. They knew the case was full of holes. They gave me 5 years, thinking I'd just shut up and take it. Wrong guy. I worked for a construction company, managed some pretty big projects. Back then, I liked the paycheck more than the actual work. It let me live comfortably, buy cars, spend money on myself, and yeah, on weed. I preferred smoking too. I wouldn't call myself a pothead exactly, but a weekend thing. You never really think the laws are going to change in a way that comes down on you personally. You're just smoking. Who are you really hurting? The day they grabbed me, one of my former workers had gotten himself into trouble, got caught with something, and to get out of it he needed to flip on someone. They cooked up this story where he'd come to my place and leave with drugs. Said I sold to him, and off I went to prison. He burst into the apartment, slammed the door shut behind him, pulled out a cell phone which he shouldn't have had. He was supposedly there to buy from me. Offered me the phone. I told him to get lost. He walked out. I heard him say, "It didn't work out." Then I heard cops running. I went to the bedroom and lay down on the floor. They didn't rough me up much. Face down, search, called in the neighbors, paperwork, seizure. I gave it up voluntarily. It was just sitting on top of the TV in a yellow newspaper wrapper. A tiny piece of hash that I probably hadn't touched in a month. Didn't really care about it. There it sat, and my pipe. The road to freedom starts from the first second of your arrest. You have to think very carefully about what you say, how you say it, and what tone you use. Pretending it's not mine in my own apartment? Stupid. Those guys I bought from occasionally, it's their business. Look, you make money off this. You deal with it. I'm just a consumer. They took me to do a controlled buy. Nothing happened. We just stood around, wasted a ton of time. I was driving my own car. There was this scrawny cop sitting next to me. I even thought about clocking him and driving the other direction. I had a turbocharged 2-liter. No way they could have caught me. But I had the thought. You think about freedom, how good it would be. The whole plan was to lock me up hard, but the case was flimsy as hell. The amount they seized from me, you couldn't sell that. Instead of, I cooperated, turned over that first stash. Usually that gets you probation. Maybe they close the case after the season. At least back then. But me, straight to Maricopa the next day. County jail. All the way to trial. That's the flip side of county lockup. You're sitting there maybe 15, 20 feet from freedom. You can hear parties, all the sounds of the city, church bells, and you're just sitting there. The lawyer situation, that's a whole sad story on its own. This lawyer managed to take money from my mom and my ex-wife, and every single visit was paid. Conversations about nothing. What was there to talk about? I bought it there. They found it. That's how it was. She was just bleeding us for money. The lawyer didn't even show up when they read my sentence. The Phoenix Municipal Court was on the first floor of that building. That's where I got my sentence. The transport vans would pull up. They'd send you in one by one to wait. The first time, you don't even know how to act. You're always looking around with your eyes, searching for friends, anyone you know. It's so important to see someone you care about when they call your name. 10 feet to freedom, from the building entrance to the van. Everyone inside, except the guards, desperately wanted out. Instead of going home, 5 years away from myself, 5 years, that cosmic injustice, you can't control it, you're cuffed. One on the bottom rail, one on top. I decided to meet them on the stairs and lean on them from above. When I got there, I arrived at the prison with a red tag. High risk for escape, organizing riots, assaults. Soon as I got to prison, I knew this wasn't my story. There were all kinds of sketchy people there. Those 5 years, they offered me. They said, stick it out here. Not really my scene. Jumping fences wasn't my thing either. What kept me going was the hope that I could end this much sooner than the prosecutor and judge decided. I could get back to my family, my parents, way faster if I fought for my freedom. So you map out what you can do. The appeal didn't work, so you got your complaint. Next is the Supreme Court and the Attorney General's office. Everyone writes complaints, but most people write nonsense. You have to prepare properly. You're not some jailhouse snitch begging for help. I started looking for meetings, as they call them, having tea with lawyers who were inside. They sit there with prosecutors who also sit there with judges who also sit there. They're not your friends. You can't just walk up and say, hey, read this. There are 2,000 people locked up. Have tea, grab some candy, pop in for a visit. I went to the library once. Didn't interest me much, but the librarian was a former judge. I was curious about him. Those first steps. They gave advice, yeah, but how can you, sitting in prison, get access to the legal texts you need? You can't just walk up to the unit chief and say, hey chief, I need to flip through some law books. He'd tell you to sit down and forget it. I needed to establish some communication with the outside world to get, say, a Supreme Court ruling. Letters don't work. A phone call once every 6 months. The 15 minutes you're supposedly allowed, that's not enough either. Having a cell phone, that's 15 days in the hole immediately, and then you miss every amnesty, everything. That's the worst violation you can commit in prison. Music and the stage in prison, that was my access to a phone, to work on my appeals, and all that other stuff. That's why I got into it. There was a local rock band performing. I walked up and said, guys, need a guitarist. They looked at me like I was crazy. Get out of here. I started looking for professional musicians, or semi-pro ones throughout the whole prison. I realized there were a lot of them. There was a piano with this guy Boris. Everything was there, but it was out of tune. I took it apart at my own risk, and the deputy warden walked by, looked at me, and said, you know something about this? I said, yeah, of course. First time I'd taken one apart. Put it back together the first time. That was my chance to talk to him about starting a second band. We need a mixer, we need this and that. How? You go to the deputy warden for programs and say, let me make a call so they can send it in. They gave me the number. Amazing. The deal was always like this. One call to my wife, another for business. It got to the point where my wife would say, you call every day and I'm still asleep. I organized that band's performances only to get access to legal materials and a lawyer. I had a second lawyer, a good one who actually cared, who didn't need my money, which I didn't have anyway. He had the right goal. Things couldn't get any worse for me, and my goal was to get a fair sentence. The lawyer brought me the Supreme Court decision. It was a fascinating document for me. All my doubts about how I was wrongly convicted were laid out clearly. In the end, I managed to prove my partial guilt in the crime. I wrote only 2 well-crafted complaints with solid arguments and explanations. My goal was for them to read it carefully. That was accomplished from inside prison. The Supreme Court agreed with my arguments. The Attorney General agreed. They decided to hold a new trial. But since I was wrongfully convicted, there was a different judge and different prosecutor. I left prison on March 18th and on August 7th by order of the state of Arizona. I was released from the courtroom. The first time you show up in court, you think about seeing your family, how your mother will look at you, dad, wife. The second time, already lighter. Third time, lighter still. Then the sentence, the time. It's devastating when they release you for court. That's the best day of your life. I convinced them that yes, I was guilty of the lesser charge, 18 months was fair. But I'd already served a year and 7 months, and they applied early release to my case. Turned out I'd served 9 months too many, for which I could get compensation. I'm free now, really free, walking around, going wherever. I had to make sure there wouldn't be any setup situations because the prosecutor I had wasn't just anyone, and he took a real hit for that wrongful conviction. I'm in all the databases, the draft boards. That mark is for life. Honestly, it's really unpleasant to look at all this stuff, to remember it. I just want it all to fade away, be done with, never happen again. You value freedom a little differently now. It can mean so many different things.